talking about an elemental strategy for India and how to really create and how can we take India towards an Atma Bhoomi Nirbhar Bharat. The word Bhoomi in Atma Nirbhar Bharat has been very intentionally chosen, and I'll explain why. The reason for that is our earth and all life on earth is composed of the 5 different foundational elements, which is soil, water, fire, air, and space. And in that sequence, if you actually see, that sequence is important. I'll explain why. But all of these elements, we need to restore these elements. We need to heal those elements. We need to nurture those elements because of the fact that if you look at the planetary boundaries, which the scientist like Johann Rockström has explained, there are 9 planetary boundaries. 6 of them have already been breached. They are out of the safe zone. So if the remaining 3 are also out of the safe zone, then God help sending another Noah's Ark to us. So we have to be very mindful. So that is what Atma Bhoomi Nirbhar Bharat means. It means that our self-reliance has to be rooted in the 5 foundational elements in order to achieve true prosperity for India or even for the world. So while I will be using India as an example, this template can apply to anybody in the world. So that is how we are going to address these elements. And all of these elements, as you already know with the different talks, all of these elements have been degraded. And we need to focus on those elements so that the planetary boundaries, whether it is climate change, whether it is biodiversity loss, freshwater use, our oceans, everything has to be restored and they are out of the safe zone. So I would like to bring forth the Indian knowledge systems here in order to explain what I mean. So if you look at soil, water, fire, air, and space, they exactly correspond or map even to the chakras in our human body, starting from the bottom, soil, and then going upwards, water, and so on. And obviously, once you reach space, which is on the throat chakra, and if you look at the other 2 elements, which are beyond the material phenomena, the Ajna chakra as well as the chakra in the crown, so they are beyond material elements. So we need to focus and we need to nurture these elements because otherwise we cannot fix planet Earth, or in the human evolutionary process, we even cannot fix ourselves. So the macrocosm and the microcosm are deeply interlinked and they are deeply connected. And there is a lot of symbolism in the chakras. For example, if you take the element, the Swadhisthana chakra, which corresponds to the water element of the earth, you see the symbol with the crescent moon, right? Inside a lotus. What does it actually mean? It actually means how much the moon also has influence on the tidal waves, on the sap flow within a plant. Every fluid content is being influenced by the space element, which is the moon. So we have to be mindful, we have to be careful. Even if you take the chakras and map it to the fingers on your palm, they correspond exactly like that. So bottom line is, soil is the most important because it starts from the bottom, then water, and then so on. So the sequencing is very important. That's how we need to focus. What does this mean in the modern context for India? All our ministries, government ministries, should also be mapped according to the element. We have a ministry of Jal Shakti. Why not a ministry of soil? Why not a ministry of energy, which is fire? Why not a ministry of air and space and so on? So even if our society is structured along these lines, like even education along these lines, they all can work with each other very collaboratively and create the perfect system that we need, which is based on the Indian knowledge systems and applied in the modern context. I will focus on two different areas on soil, which is agriculture and degraded land. Okay. So soil is the second biggest carbon sink on Earth, right after water. 1/3 of the landmass, approximately that. And also trees grow on the soil. The trees capture the carbon dioxide, and the soils actually store the carbon dioxide. And these are all living entities. Soil is a living entity. There are so many microbes in the soil. That is what keeps the soil alive. And we need to nurture and respect that. So with agriculture, what I want to focus on is basically, if you look at agriculture, 50% of the habitable land in the world is devoted to agriculture, right? And 77% of that 50% is all animal agriculture. So which is basically raising livestock. So when we talk about livestock, I want to focus on cattle. Let's focus on cattle because that is the major component, right? So what happens with cattle? 8 billion people in the world, and annually, if you look at the globe, 300 million cattle are being slaughtered every single year. Why is that happening? If you look at the life cycle of cattle, basically, you raise them for dairy production, for milk and all that. And a calf grows into a cow in 18 months. And in its, after 3-4 years, the calf, you start impregnating it, and then you start producing more calves, and that is how you increase the production. And what happens is, in 6 to 7 years, when that life of that cow is over, or the water buffalo in India is over, then goes to the slaughterhouse. Then it becomes burger in somebody's plate or whatever. So that is why we are producing so much cattle, right? So we have to question, okay, the dairy industry itself, it starts from there. What is really happening? Let us look at the history of cattle, right? We used to have 6 trillion trees in the world before actual large-scale farming started. Today, we have only 3 trillion trees. So Dr. Sailesh Rao, who's the founder of Climate Healers, and you can go into his website, he has written a beautiful position paper and peer-reviewed paper. He's from Stanford. He was a systems engineer who became an environmentalist. And in his peer-reviewed paper, he shows that 87% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world are actually accounted because of animal agriculture, much more than fossil fuels. So he thinks that is the killing machine, and the burning machine is the fossil fuels. Now let's look at even dairy, for example, because that's where the problem is starting, from an ahimsa or a sattvic perspective. From ahimsa perspective, is it right to impregnate all the cattle and then send them eventually to the slaughterhouses, doing this kind of a mass factory production and confining them? In the Western countries like US and China, they even feed them with meat residues. Not so in India, obviously. But still, the overall practices are not so conducive from an animal cruelty standpoint, that is ahimsa. From a sattvic standpoint, our traditional seers have told us that you can only drink milk after the cow has been completely fed, and also the cow should be free range. It has to have its freedom in grazing the grass and so on. So you cannot take its milk after the calf is fully fed. I don't think those practices happen anymore. So we have to be mindful of all of these things and what we are doing to the animals. So rightfully so, people are questioning, these practices. We are a microcosm of the macrocosm, the earth. So whatever happens in our body is also happening in our earth, right? All the Panch Mahabhutas are there in both the systems. So creating all these dams and everything like that, you're obstructing the water flow. There are new technologies called as blue wave energy, where you harness the energy before fresh water enters seawater, you have a membrane, right? And you tap the energy, the different energy forms in the fresh water and the seawater through this membrane, which separates that. You tap the energy and you create much more energy by the chemical and the ionic differences between fresh and seawater. Blue wave energy, all this technology exists, but we are not even harnessing that. We are still stuck in some of the old technologies that we have. Wastewater treatment plants in India are called as sewage treatment plants. Then you have also some decentralized wastewater treatment plants as well. As I said, close to 1/3 is being treated, right? But why do we want to call sewage treatment plants as sewage treatment plants? Why couldn't we call them as resource recovery plants? You see, the mindset changes immediately. If I meet someone, he is very shy to tell me he's a sewage treatment plant operator. But if I tell me, hey, you're working in the resource recovery plant, the mindset changes immediately to entrepreneurship. Then he starts thinking, oh, wow, I work in a resource recovery plant. Let me see how I can make all these resources from wastewater to biofuels, biogas, biofertilizer. How can I even generate electricity from wastewater? India follows the same phenomena as what is happening in the world, because of chemical agriculture and so on. A lot of our land is degraded. But there are ways to restore these lands, to bring health back into these lands. I mean, in everything I'm saying, there is a challenge, but it opens a lot more opportunities for startups to go plant-based, right? And that is where I'm focusing on. And that is how we make India prosperous. For example, even on degraded land, a lot of information is also available on SangamTalks, where they talk about Vedic agriculture, they talk about Vriksha Ayurveda, they talk about cosmic agriculture, which is basically aligning or grouping even plants based upon their astrological traits so that the pest control is reduced. And with the lunar rhythms, are we following all these traditional practices? What about homotherapy in agriculture? I mean, there are just so many things, and there are just a few examples in India, like Athachi farms in Kerala, or other kind of botanical sanctuaries in Kerala, many more, or sadhana forests in Araval, that are following some of these practices. So we can revive our soils. Soils need 3 to 5% organic matter in them. Organic agriculture is more related to less chemical inputs, but we go beyond that in Indian traditional knowledge systems. I would like you to listen to Dr. Prabhakar Rao. He is on YouTube. He has given many talks, excellent speaker, and you can gain a lot of knowledge in these areas.